The slap echoed down the hallway like a dropped book, sharp and sudden, and every head turned a fraction too late. She stood frozen for half a second, eyes wide, breath caught. Then the world narrowed to a single choice. Stay with this story until the very end, because what happens next isn't about revenge. It's about the moment a quiet soul refuses to disappear. And if stories of courage and unexpected strength move you, tap like and subscribe right now so you don't miss what comes next. The quiet girl had always learned how to be invisible. Walk close to the lockers, keep your eyes on the floor, arrive early, leave late. Silence was her shield, patience her habit. The bullies mistook that for weakness. They always do. He laughed after the slap, a hollow sound meant to draw an audience, meant to prove something to no one in particular. The hallway smelled of floor cleaner and damp coats, and somewhere a bell rang, but the noise felt distant, muffled by the pounding in her ears. She felt the heat on her cheek, the sting blooming and then fading, replaced by something steadier. A line had been crossed, and she knew it with a clarity that surprised even her. The years of swallowing words, of counting breaths, of stepping aside, those years had taught her balance. They had taught her timing. When he reached for her collar, fingers curling with careless confidence, she moved. Not fast, not slow, decisive. The motion was practiced in the way instincts are practiced, refined through repetition of restraint. She redirected his momentum, guided his arm away from her body, and in that instant, the laughter died. There was no spectacle, no lingering cruelty, only a brief, controlled action that left him shocked by the sudden shift in power. He gasped, eyes wide, stumbling back, and the hallway fell into a stunned quiet. She released him immediately, stepping away, hands open, breathing steady. She hadn't struck him. She hadn't chased him. She had simply ended the threat. Somewhere behind them, lockers clanged as students backed away, unsure whether to cheer or flee. A voice shouted for a teacher. The quiet girl adjusted her bag on her shoulder, cheeks flushed, not with fear now, but with resolve. She looked at him once, not with triumph, not with anger, but with a calm that said the rules had changed. When the teacher's footsteps finally pounded around the corner, the scene froze into fragments, the bully clutching his arm, pride bruised more than anything, the onlookers buzzing with disbelief, the quiet girl standing straight, eyes clear. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She waited, because she understood something he never had, that strength isn't loud, and courage doesn't ask permission. And as the teacher took control and the hallway slowly returned to its rhythm, a whisper spread from locker to lockers. The quiet girl wasn't quiet anymore. The teacher's arrival didn't bring relief so much as a strange suspension, like the air before rain. Voices overlapped, accusations spilled, and the bullies' friends tried to rewrite the moment into something safer for themselves. The quiet girl listened without interrupting, eyes focused on a scuffed tile at the teacher's feet. She knew this part, the noise, the narrative tug of war, the way confidence often masqueraded as truth. When asked to speak, she lifted her head and told it plainly, without flourish. No insults, no embellishment, just sequence and fact. Her voice surprised people. It was steady, clear, and measured, like someone reading from a well-kept ledger. The teacher's brow furrowed, not with anger but with attention. He'd seen this before, the way crowds bend reality when power expects compliance. He asked questions. He separated students. He watched reactions more than answers. The bully's swagger faded into irritation, then into something close to fear when he realized the room wasn't tilting in his favor. Meanwhile, the quiet girl felt a delayed tremor run through her hands. Not panic, but the body's acknowledgement of a line crossed and held. She tucked her hands into her sleeves and breathed. The hallway emptied, but the moment lingered. In the office, paperwork hummed its dull ritual. The counselor offered water. The nurse checked her cheek and asked if she wanted ice. She declined both, not out of pride, but because she wanted to stay present, to remember the clarity she'd felt when she chose not to be small. News traveled faster than the bell schedule. By lunch, whispers followed her like a second shadow. Some were admiring, some cautious, some resentful. She didn't feed any of them. She ate quietly, eyes on her tray, noticing how a few seats nearby remained empty, not from fear but from recalibration. Power had shifted, and everyone was adjusting their internal maps. In the afternoon, the teacher asked her to stay back after class. The room smelled of dry erase marker and old books, a familiar comfort. He spoke carefully, acknowledging the rules and the seriousness, but there was something else too. Respect. He asked what training she had. She shrugged, uncomfortable with labels. "My grandfather taught me balance," she said, "and when to let go." He nodded, understanding more than he let on. Consequences were discussed, as they must be, but context mattered, and so did restraint. As the day wound down, the bully passed her once more, escorted, eyes downcast. He didn't meet her gaze. She felt no triumph, only a quiet certainty settle into place. She walked home under a sky streaked with late light, each step lighter than the last. At home, she told her mother what happened, leaving out the whispers and the looks, focusing on the choice. Her mother listened, then hugged her longer than usual. "You're allowed to take up space," she said softly. That night, sleep came slow, but it came. The quiet girl replayed the moment. Not the slap, not the shock, but the breath before she moved. The decision. She realized that courage hadn't arrived in a roar. It had arrived like a key turning. And tomorrow the hallway would be the same length, the lockers the same color. But she would walk it differently. By the next morning, the hallway felt like a river that had changed course overnight. Same walls, same lockers, but a different current pulling at ankles and attention. She sensed it before she saw it. The way conversations dipped when she passed, the way eyes lifted and held for a beat longer than curiosity required. The quiet girl had never wanted a reputation. She'd spent years sanding herself smooth to avoid edges. Now edges found her anyway. In first period, a note appeared on her desk from a girl she barely knew, folded into a neat square. "I'm glad you didn't let him do that." No signature. She tucked it into her book and focused on the lesson, letting the familiar cadence of instruction steady her breathing. But steadiness didn't mean numbness. Beneath the surface, thoughts churned, about fairness, about consequence, about how quickly stories mutate once they leave the mouth. By second period, the administration's decisions rippled outward. The bully was suspended pending review. His friends were separated into different classes. The announcements were clinical, stripped of names. But everyone understood. Power doesn't like daylight, and daylight had arrived. During lunch, she chose a table near the window and watched clouds pile up like unfinished thoughts. A teacher sat down uninvited, not to interrogate but to check in. They talked about assignments and deadlines, then drifted to balance, how to stand firm without becoming rigid. He shared a story about his own youth, about learning that restraint is not retreat. She listened, surprised by how much it mattered to hear that adults wrestle with the same questions. In the afternoon, the counselor asked if she wanted to join a peer mediation group. The invitation was careful, framed as an option, not an expectation. She asked for time. The truth was, she didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted to be a student. Yet symbols have gravity, and gravity pulls whether you ask it to or not. After school, she walked the long way home, letting the city's small noises, bus brakes, leaves skittering, a radio somewhere playing something hopeful, reassemble her. At home, she found her grandfather at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes smiling before his mouth did. He'd heard, of course. News travels through families faster than through schools. He didn't lecture. He asked her to show him the movement, not to practice, but to remember. She demonstrated slowly, emphasizing foot placement, breath, the moment of release. He nodded, correcting nothing. "You didn't chase," he said. "That matters." They talked about lines, how to draw them, how to hold them without barbed wire. That evening, she opened her notebook and wrote until the page filled, about fear that had disguised itself as patience, about anger that had taught her clarity, about the difference between force and control. Writing didn't solve anything, but it arranged the pieces so she could see where to step next. The next day brought rain and a different test. A group clustered near the stairs, voices raised, the old rhythms threatening to return. She felt the familiar pull to fade, to slip around the edge. Instead, she paused, not to confront, not to accuse, but to exist where she was. The noise recalibrated. Someone scoffed, someone else shrugged. It wasn't a victory, but it was a choice. In class, a discussion turned to responsibility and reaction. She spoke once, briefly, about proportion, how responses should be measured not by ego but by necessity. The room quieted. Afterward, a boy approached her, awkward and earnest, asking how to keep calm when provoked. She told him the truth: calm isn't the absence of feeling. It's deciding what deserves your energy. As the week unfolded, the school settled into a new pattern. The bully returned briefly to retrieve work, escorted and subdued, the shine gone from his swagger. He avoided her, but avoidance can be its own kind of learning. Meanwhile, teachers adjusted seating, watched more closely, intervened earlier. Systems don't fix themselves, people do, one interruption at a time. On Friday, the counselor followed up. She agreed to attend one mediation session, not as a spokesperson, but as a participant. The room was neutral. Chairs in a circle, light filtered through blinds. The conversation was halting, imperfect. Apologies stumbled, accountability lagged. She didn't accept anything that wasn't real. She named the harm without dramatizing it, asked for boundaries without demanding penance. When it ended, she felt tired in a clean way, like muscles after honest work. Walking out, she realized something else had changed. Her silence had once been a hiding place. Now it was a choice she could make without erasing herself. Over the weekend, she volunteered at the community center, helping younger kids with homework. One of them asked why her cheeks still looked faintly pink. She smiled and said sometimes lessons leave marks, and sometimes marks fade. On Sunday night, she laid out her clothes for Monday with care, not armor but intention. At school the next week, she laughed more easily. Not louder, easier. She joined a study group, then a club meeting she'd always watched from the doorway. The fear didn't vanish, it resized itself. Fear became information instead of a command. When the bell rang at the end of the day, she lingered by the lockers where it had begun, listening to the echo that was no longer sharp. She touched the cool metal, grounding herself, and walked on. Strength, she had learned, isn't a single moment you survive. It's a practice you keep, even when no one is watching. Monday returned like a deep breath, ordinary, necessary, and quietly brave. The hallway no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a place where choices were visible. She noticed how teachers positioned themselves closer to the traffic points, how students looked out for one another in small, unannounced ways. Systems had adjusted, but more importantly, people had. The quiet girl, no longer just a label, walked with a steadier gait, not because she expected trouble, but because she trusted her footing. In class, she raised her hand once, then twice, not to perform courage, but to participate. The room responded in kind. Respect, she learned, is often a mirror offer clarity. Receive it back. Midweek brought the meeting everyone dreaded and needed, the restorative circle. It wasn't dramatic. It was awkward, careful, human. The bully spoke haltingly about pressure and expectations he'd never named before. His words didn't excuse the harm, and no one pretended they did. Accountability sat in the center of the circle like a weight everyone could feel. When it was her turn, she spoke about boundaries and safety, about how fear shrinks the world until you can't see exits. She didn't ask for apologies, she asked for change. The room agreed to specifics, seating plans, check-ins, consequences that would stick. When it ended, nothing felt magically healed, but something felt possible. That mattered. Days passed. Homework piled. Laughter returned in layers. The quiet girl joined the mediation group, not as a banner, but as a bridge. She listened more than she spoke, asked questions that slowed the rush to blame. Younger students watched her with a kind of hope that made her careful with her words. At home, she kept writing, turning moments into sentences, sentences into lessons she could revisit. Her grandfather read one entry and smiled. "You're building a spine," he said. On Friday afternoon, the bell released the week. In the hallway where it began, a teacher paused beside her. "You changed the temperature here," he said. She shook her head gently. We all did. Outside, the air felt new. She walked with friends now, not because she needed protection, but because connection felt right. She thought about the moment that started it all, not the slap, but the breath before she moved. The decision to be present. The decision to stop shrinking. Courage, she understood, isn't loud or lasting by default, it's renewed. It shows up when you choose it again. As the sun dipped, she turned toward home, carrying books and a future that felt less narrow. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that strength can be quiet and justice can be measured, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Sharing stories like this helps them reach the people who need them most.